Hey, I've just been reading your comments on discussion 2B, writing and social action, and I had some comments of my own. I wanted to highlight some of the things you said, but as well, add to the conversation. So from the first posts, I noted that you had a discussion kind of about what writing is and what is written communication. One of the things I wanted to point out is that in rhetoric and composition, there's a strong move to consider many things writing, including some of the things you named, such as print journalism, Facebook, Twitter, blogs, books, other kinds of print writing, but also multimedia writing, which connected to someone's point about television, and I would add to that video in general. So writing is all of those things, and when you talk about writing as social action, I think you're talking about all those forms of writing. So the next thing I wanted to add or connect to some of the things you said is that many of you use the model of a reader being moved by something someone else had written to action. But I also wanted you to consider that perhaps we might be talking about a situation moving someone to become a writer, that is, to choose writing as the form their action took. So anyway, just another sort of twist on that model. A number of you talked about news, catastrophe, disaster, crisis fatigue, that is, feeling overwhelmed by all of the things that are in front of our faces in the news all the time, and then therefore feeling to some extent paralyzed in terms of what might provoke us to action. This connected, I thought, to another thread, which is what is or isn't considered worthy of our attention. Christoph points out with some frustration that things that are sometimes long, ongoing crises don't get the attention that they should because they're moved off the front page by other kinds of disasters. And I thought that just the general sense of, how does a writer, affect the attention span of the American public in terms of trying to help people understand and feel moved to action. Someone pointed out, used PETA as an example of a sort of controversial style of communication about public issues. This connected, I thought, with a point that one of you made about directing writing to people who can make a difference. PETA, I think, is an example of a slightly different model, which is that it is sort of like a pest of a communicator. That is, it's not polite, it's aggressive, it's rude, and yet it seems to have affected public discourse by making it possible for the more mainstream and polite organizations to advance their causes because they create more space in the discourse for the aggressive and outlying opinion, which then makes the middle ground seem more normal. Anyway, I think that's an interesting idea. If anybody's interested in PETA, I have some good sources on that. I think they're a really interesting organization. Several points I thought that were worth reiterating. Let's see, Rachel mentioned that she sees writing as a part of a cycle of events and not necessarily a cause in and of itself, which points to the way that we understand issues. Sometimes, we think that when an issue comes in front of us and we hear about it for the first time, that's the first time it's ever occurred. But of course, everything has a history, including issues, but also including documents. And so trying to understand the antecedents of an issue and of the written responses to it can be helpful for any writer in understanding how he or she might enter that discourse. Let's see, Alicia talked about writing as, quote, pretty much the first step after thought. That is, that it itself is the action that comes after something grabs our attention or moves us. And I thought that was something worth considering. And finally, Christy mentioned that she saw the trifecta of writing as social action being the skill of writing, and then a worthy cause or a cause that's, moves the writer. And I would add to that, the specific moment in which the writing occurs, which you shape your writing to suit. And then finally, the appropriate technology to deliver it as a form of action to the people who might be moved in turn to act. Anyway, I thought this was a good discussion, and I appreciated all the things you added and brought into it. And thanks for listening to me.